Russian President Vladimir Putin arrives in Beijing tonight for a meeting with Xi Jinping. Chinese state media putting the number of face-to-face encounters between these two leaders at more than 40 since 2013, reflecting what both have called a partnership with no limits. And for more we can expect from the China-Russia summit, Dasha Chernyshova is monitoring developments for us in Moscow. Dasha, what are some of the key items on Mr. Putin's to-do list on this trip?
Well, certainly trade and economics are top of the agenda, and the Russian president is expected to be signing more than 40 documents with his Chinese counterpart during this trip. We also hearing that Russia is looking for a high potential of the Power Siberia 2 gas pipeline moving forward. The Russian politicians stressed that particularly now that demand in China is growing for Russian energy in light of the turbulence in the Middle East, China is getting more projects of interest jointly to be developed with the Russian side. So trade turnover is expected to be growing further, and the two leaders are expected to be making sure that this potential is actually used to its full in 2025. That has risen over to 240 billion US dollars, a very significant number. And obviously the Russian president will be looking to reaffirm very close alignment with the Chinese side here, suggesting that the two countries do stand together and agree to support one another, especially when it comes to geopolitics and the wider context.
Dasha, geopolitical alignment, that certainly will be a question many will be looking at, given that the US president just left Beijing Friday last week and Russia's president arriving in Beijing this evening.
Exactly so. But interestingly, the Kremlin is saying that there was no predetermined date for this trip to take place right after Trump's visit, especially given the fact that Trump's visit was supposed to be earlier this year. So from the Russian perspective, it has all been agreed in advance and there is no coincidence. But many analysts are saying that actually you have to look closely at this very timing, because this geopolitical triangle of Russia, China and the United States is something that has to be very closely monitored. We understand that indeed Moscow is going to stand shoulder to shoulder with China. In his video address ahead of this visit to Beijing, the Russian president said Russia and China are going to support one another, including when it comes to the defense of their sovereignty and national unity, as well as saying that their partnership is not aimed against other countries. But given the very idea that Russia is now holding its nuclear drills, and that last week Russia tested its nuclear capable Sarmat missile, something that Moscow says is interceptable, it cannot be intercepted by the modern air defense systems, is what is sending the signal, according to many analysts here. So certainly this visit by the Russian president is reaffirming that Beijing and Moscow stand together despite the US trying to normalize relations with Moscow and somehow to balance its ties with Beijing as well.
Thanks, Dasha Chernyshova, for us there from Moscow. CNA senior correspondent Tan Guan also outlines key issues Mrs. Xi and Mr. Putin are likely to discuss when they meet.
Beijing says Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin will discuss bilateral ties, cooperation in different fields, and international and regional issues of common concern. But we can make intelligent guesses as to what they will discuss. The first issue, of course, would be Ukraine. China still presents itself as a neutral, even possible peace broker. But Western governments see Beijing as giving Moscow the economic and diplomatic breathing space. So Ukraine is almost certainly part of the conversation, but we should not expect China to publicly pressure Russia. The second issue on the table very likely would be Middle East. Now, the conflict there has disrupted energy markets and raised fresh concerns about shipping routes, especially the Straits of Hormuz. That matters to China because it is the world's biggest energy importer. It also gives Russia a chance to say we can be a more secure long-term energy partner through the overland routes. Now, the third issue is global order. That means the UN, the G20 sanctions, and what both sides call a multipolar world. Now, China and Russia both oppose what they see as Western dominance, and both sides want to show they have alternatives to a US-led system. And then there is the timing. Now, Putin is arriving just days after President Trump's visit to China. Beijing is not officially linking the two visits, but the optics are hard to miss. But China wants to show it can stabilize ties with Washington while keeping strategic trust with Moscow. In other words, China wants to be seen as an indispensable diplomatic player, the country that both US and Russia have to engage.